Hello ladies and gentlemen, and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host, Brett Murphy, and for today's video, I have a brand new ranking for you all, and I am going to be ranking all 4 phases of the MCU. So Black Panther Wakanda Forever released in theaters this past weekend, marking the end of Phase 4, at least according to Kevin Feige, who said back at Comic-Con in the summer, I believe it was some point in July, that Black Panther Wakanda Forever would mark the end of Phase 4. And yes, I know we still have the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special coming out. I'm not sure if that's included as a part of Phase 4. Maybe it's just its own thing. Maybe it's a bit of an epilogue. Maybe it's just sort of a bonus to go with Phase 4. But nevertheless, the man himself who runs the show said that Wakanda Forever is the end, so that is what I'm going with. Before I hop into the actual ranking itself, I just wanted to let you all know that I have an entire playlist dedicated to all of my ranking videos. There's over 100 videos currently on that playlist, so if rankings are your thing, then I guarantee you'll find something you like. And so without further ado, let's hop right into things. Number 4, Phase 1. Now I know some of you might be a little pissed hearing that one, but please, hear me out, because by the end I might actually have you convinced. Okay, first things first. Undeniably so, Phase 1 has some absolute bangers, okay? The first Iron Man movie, released way back in 2008, that kicked this whole thing off, is still by far one of the MCU's best projects to date. And that first Avengers movie is probably top 3 to 5 at the very least. I simply love the first Avengers movie. It's one of my all-time favorite theater-going experiences. It blew my mind back in 2012, and I enjoy it just as much now. And if you've been following my channel for a while, or maybe you know me personally, you will likely know that I also have a major soft spot for the first Captain America movie. Yes, it's a bit campier, it's a bit hokier, it's just a little bit more comic book-y than probably the rest of the MCU. But for me personally, it worked. I loved war movies. This is very much so a World War II movie. Chris Evans proved immediately why he was the perfect casting choice for Cap, and Hugo Weaving as Red Skull was just brilliant. I loved Haley Atwell. Of course, there was our introduction to Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, later the Winter Soldier as well. And this movie just did a lot right for me. But the problem lies with the other 3 movies in Phase 1. Iron Man 2 is a deeply flawed, but still mostly enjoyable sequel. And then you have The Incredible Hulk, which doesn't even really feel like it's a part of the MCU at all, because Edward Norton did not continue playing the Hulk at all after this first movie. I think this movie had some interesting ideas. I liked the increased focus on Bruce Banner instead of the Hulk, and that final fight with Abomination is one of the MCU's best final throwdowns, but everything else is a bit of a mess. You can tell that they really didn't know where they wanted to go with this one, and there was absolutely some conflict behind the scenes. And I typically get a lot of shit for this take, but I find the first Thor movie to be unbelievably boring. It's just so very dull in my own personal opinion, okay? I love the look of Asgard. I think the costume design and the set design and the visuals are all fantastic in this movie, okay? Chris Hemsworth is superb, Tom Hiddleston just as much so, Natalie Portman's great, Kat Dennings, Stellan Skarsgård, of course you also have Anthony Hopkins, the legend himself, as Odin, but really aside from the casting and the costume design and things like that, I just find this movie unbelievably boring. So for me, those 3 movies are actually, I believe as of right now, in my bottom 5 of the MCU. So you have 2 movies in the top 10, you have 1 movie, the first Captain America, probably in the top 15, and I'm a pretty big defender of it, but when you have 3 movies out of 30 coming from this phase that are in my bottom 5 for the MCU, that's a pretty big blow. And that, folks, is why I decided to put Phase 1 at the bottom. Number 3, Phase 2. Following up Phase 1 is Phase 2, and I want to start off by, of course, addressing the elephant in the room, being the weakest MCU movie in my own opinion, being Thor: The Dark World, okay? This one is just everything that Thor got wrong, and then some. Really, the only saving graces from this movie is I like the Thor and Loki dynamic, I like their relationship, I love that Tom Hiddleston was back here. Again, the costume design, set design, The Dark Elves, I loved their lore, I loved their look, but everything was so obviously and painfully wasted. Just so many missed opportunities, and the color palette and really overall feel of the movie are just so unbearably dull. I also think the conclusion to Phase 2 being Ant-Man is pretty mid. I of course always address the fact that the Ant-Man movies are hilarious and some of the funniest of the MCU, because of course, like everyone else, I love Paul Rudd, Evangeline Lilly, Michael Douglas, Michael Pena, and even David Dastmalchian and T.I. were all very well casted, okay? I think they all worked well together, they had great chemistry, they all hit their marks, hit their beats, made me laugh, did their jobs. But what this movie suffers from is the fact that it feels so uninspired. What I mean by that is the fact that this first Ant-Man movie really just feels like a blatant retelling of the first Iron Man movie with a few small little changes here and there. So again, it's funny, it's charming, I love the cast, but when it comes to the story and the villain, I was left wanting a lot more from this first one at least. And then you have the controversial ones being Iron Man 3 and Avengers Age of Ultron, and truth be told, no surprise here, a couple of hot takes coming your way, I love both of those movies. Iron Man 3 is a Christmas movie in my opinion. I watch it every Christmas. I love the handling of Tony's PTSD. I love the whole Extremis storyline. I loved the Mandarin twist. I thought it was very clever and well executed, and I don't think people should be as pissed anymore, considering we do now have, or at least had, the real Mandarin. But for me, the man behind the curtain, the puppet master being Aldrich Killian, all of that worked for me. And then of course, I loved the final battle. It's all kinds of epic with the Extremis soldiers versus the Iron Man suits. So huge defender of Iron Man 3 here, and then Avengers Age of Ultron, exact same thing. I love it. I think it's every bit as good as the other three Avengers movies. Yes, that is a statement I am making right now. Maybe not quite as good, but for me, it's still in the top 10 of the MCU. I love everything about it. I think it was a natural sequel. I think it continued every character's story very, very well, and I think it set up brilliantly for the future. It introduced us to Scarlet Witch, this version briefly of Quicksilver, as well as Vision. I think James Spader's Ultron is one of the best villains in the MCU, hand down, and it just has an unbelievably wild and totally bonkers finale. You have a city in the sky acting as an asteroid to destroy the world. It's just all sorts of weird, but in all the best ways. And then you have the massive heavy hitters that are Captain America the Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy. I feel truly, I genuinely, honestly feel that you would be hard-pressed to find anyone that doesn't have those two movies in their top 10, potentially even their top 5, or as their favorite MCU movie. One of them. I've seen so many lists that have the Winter Soldier or the first Guardians movie as their hands-down favorite MCU movie. So when you have two massive fan favorites like that, two that are a bit more middle ground, a bit controversial, but I love Age of Ultron and I love Iron Man 3. For me, the first Ant-Man's a little mid, okay, sure, it's fine, and then there's the Dark World, but when you're hitting 4 or 5 out of 6, to me, that makes it better than the first phase. Are you looking for the perfect gift for the movie lover in your life, or maybe you just want to treat yourself? Then look no further than the most unique piece of movie art you could possibly have with Movie Palette. Visit moviepalette.com right now and use code BAM15 at the checkout for 15% off your order. And now, back to the video. Number 2, Phase 4. Okay, at this point in time, this one has been kind of widely known as, or at least dubbed, Marvel's experimental phase, because it is quite experimental. We got some movies that were really out there, to say the least, some questionable decisions story-wise, and then it was our introduction to the Disney Plus series that are very directly tied into the movies. Not everyone's a fan of that because you do have to watch the series to understand some massive character arcs, some major plot points, to even know who some other characters are just in general. So yes, the Disney Plus series has been a bit controversial in some ways, but for the most part, I personally, as someone who keeps up with these things, found that it was a nice way to not just get movie after movie after movie, and we also got plenty of new characters and a ton of setup for the future and those next few big Avengers movies. As of this point in time, in my opinion, this phase has had some incredibly high highs, but also some devastatingly low lows. Personally, I found both Black Widow and Thor: Love and Thunder to be some of the MCU's weakest entries to date. I really didn't care for those too much. Black Widow had weak villains, a very unoriginal story, and it just felt too little too late overall. I also feel like they forgot that Natasha is not a super soldier and is just a regular assassin. They kind of took the Fast and Furious route where she was just surviving everything, and it was just really not a lot of it worked overall, and Love and Thunder was a massive disappointment to me. As someone who adores Thor Ragnarok, I expected so much more from Love and Thunder, and I was very, very let down by it. I can see why people were mixed on Miss Marvel and She-Hulk, even though I personally loved Miss Marvel. What If and Hawkeye were just alright for me. I know a lot of people really loved Hawkeye, and a lot of people are actually really looking forward to What If Season 2. I mean, I am as well, because it tied in a little closer than I think some people thought it was going to. I liked it, definitely one of the more experimental of this series that they did. Had some interesting ideas, but the execution wasn't always there, so just alright for me, and I love the Christmas setting of Hawkeye to throw that in there. And of course, Haley Steinfeld is fantastic, and I cannot wait to see more of her. If you ask me, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Eternals, because so many people hate on Eternals, I think they're way better, both of them. The series and the movie, Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Eternals, are way better than people give them credit for. And then you have some massive highlights, and I mean massive. Some of the best projects in the MCU to date. You have WandaVision, you have Loki, you have Moon Knight, you have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, you have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, now you have Black Panther: Wakanda Forever as well, and then you have freaking Spider-Man: No Way Home. So I do not get and will never understand how some people are saying that Phase 4 is trash and that the MCU should have ended with Endgame and nothing after Endgame is worth watching when you have those movies and those series, and that is exactly why I am showing a lot of love for Phase 4 and putting it in that runner-up spot. Number 1, Phase 3. Though most people would probably disagree, I personally feel that Phase 4 actually gave Phase 3 a pretty good run for its money. Not great, but pretty good, like at least gave it some competition. However, that being said, that doesn't mean that I had any doubts at all about putting Phase 3 in this number 1 spot, because really, when I decided to do this video, I was putting Phase 3 in first without any doubts. Really, I truly believe that the only dud that Phase 3 had was Captain Marvel, and even that isn't that bad. I'd probably still give it like a 7 out of 10. I loved Brie Larson in the role, and the story was just okay. Again, the story felt a bit generic, a bit by the numbers, the villains weren't all that great, but I really did love the 90s setting, and I loved Brie Larson that much in the role, so even that really isn't all that bad. Plus, it set up greatly for the future by introducing the Skrulls. The rest ranges from undeniably great to some of the best that the MCU has to offer. You have Captain America: Civil War, Doctor Strange, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. And almost every single one of those movies, once again, ranges from pretty darn good to just outright phenomenal and the best that the MCU has to offer. My top 3 right now for the MCU are Endgame in first, Civil War in second, and Infinity War in third, and those are all in Phase 3. So I personally believe that there's no doubt or denying whatsoever that Phase 3 absolutely belongs in that number 1 spot. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my ranking. While you're at it, be sure to let me know how you would have ranked all 4 phases of the MCU and what ranking you'd like to see next. If you're a movie lover whatsoever, then my channel is the place to be for you. Be it rankings like this one, top 10s, versus videos, tier videos, I have it all and so much more, with almost 600 videos currently on the channel and new ones coming each and every week. So if you enjoyed this particular video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button, and if any of that sounds like it's good to you, then smash that subscribe button right now. While you're at it, don't forget to ring that little bell icon, that way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe, thank you so much for watching, and that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.